Hi everyone, welcome to Goodknits. I'm Sherry, a Canadian knitter living in Amsterdam. I wanted to take a moment to film today because I just went to my first yarn festival ever, which was Barcelona Knits. It ran from November 15th to 16th. I thought it could be fun today that rather than sharing a traditional vlog style video, which I've done in the past, I sit down and share my top yarn finds. Because when I went to Barcelona Knits, my main goal was I really wanted to find new to me yarn brands. So I didn't spend a lot of time at the stands for yarn that I knew I could get in Amsterdam or that I've worked with before. I really was trying to explore and find yarns that were completely new to me. So I'm going to break this video into two parts. First, I'm going to talk about the incredible yarns that I found and why I want to work with them. And then at the end, I'll share a bit more about Barcelona Knits itself. So if you've never been to a yarn festival or never been to that one specifically, you can get a bit more information to decide if that's maybe something that you want to do in the future. I want to preface the yarn section by saying that I am by no means a fiber expert. I am trying to still learn a lot about the different qualities of different yarns, different fibers, how even different weights sometimes impact the garment that I'm making. And even though I've been knitting since 2017, I still feel like I have a lot to learn in that area, probably as many of us do. So if I misspeak about something or I miss an important detail about a yarn or brand, please nicely point that out in the comments. And if you have any pattern suggestions for the yarns that I mention, please also share those, because there's a few yarns here that I honestly don't know what I would knit with them, which is partly why I didn't buy those yarns. But if I find the perfect project, then I probably will be buying them. And with all the yarns that I mentioned, I do have every intention of buying all of these at some point to make a beautiful project. I just went into Barcelona Knits with a budget of 200 euros, so I'll show you the ones that I did end up buying, but I couldn't afford all of them this time. And I do try to be very mindful about the yarn that I purchase and trying to have a clear project for things. It doesn't always work. You'll see one example of that today. I really try not to have yarn just sitting in my yarn stash. All of that out of the way, let's really just get into the yarn. So the first brand that I want to bring up was probably my favorite find, and that was a brand called Xolla, and apologies if I'm saying that incorrectly. This is a brand that had a really nice story. It started by a woman named Elena, and it's a local Catalonian company that is contributing to the preservation of Catalonian wool heritage. So they had a lot of really nice details on their About Us page around kind of the history. They actually only have 2 yarns under their brand, and both of them are wool that is from Ripollet sheep, which is one of 3 native sheep brands and is actually listed as a native breed in danger of extinction. They have a really strong focus on a short supply chain and local production and opt for low impact acid dyes. So really responsible brand, really preserving the heritage of the Catalonian culture. As I mentioned, they only actually have 2 yarns, both of which are 100% Ripollet wool, non-superwash and silicone free, and they come in the most beautiful color palette. Like, I walked in, they were the first stall that you saw. I instantly went over and was just like touching and feeling everything. It was such a beautiful, rich color palette, and just the yarn was so nice to the touch. The Pastoretta is their fingering weight, and it comes in 50-gram balls, 200 meters. And their Bama is their DK weight and comes in 50-gram balls for 125 meters. I actually ended up buying the Bama DK weight yarn. This is the color Figa. You can see that it has a beautiful texture to it. So I essentially bought this as a sub for the Sadness Garn Peer Gynt because I have been wanting to make a zipper sweater light by Petite Knit. I've had that on my list for a very long time. I bought the Filcolana Peruvian Highland wool last year to make it, decided against it, and I've been looking for another yarn. I had every intention of getting the Peer Gynt, but then when I saw this one, I figured this was perfect. It is still, well, actually they describe it perfectly. The yarn is described as having a dry feel without being itchy, and I will say I agree with that. It definitely has a very rustic looking quality to it. I mean, you can also see the hay within here, but the yarn itself is not even remotely scratchy. The fingering was very, very similar. And maybe the best part of this is the yarn is very reasonably priced. So this ball and the fingering weight are $7.95 each, which you do get additional meterage in here than the pure Gint. So it is actually probably somewhat comparable in price, a little bit more, but instead of buying 14 balls, I only had to buy 12. You can buy this from their website, but they also have a list of stockists on their website, and I was very happy to see that there's actually one in the Netherlands called Cross & Woods in The Hague. So if I want to go buy more of this and see it in person, I can. They had a beautiful dark brown color that I was originally intending to buy for my zipper sweater, but unfortunately they only had 6 balls. So I really want to go buy that in the future and find a different project, maybe like a shirt jacket kind of thing. I think when I'm ready to do that, I will go to their local stockist, or hopefully they'll be back online. In general, just super happy that I found this brand and that it was the very first one that I saw. I could have bought so many different colors of this, and I am going to be a very big fan. Stay tuned for how this knits up. I'll report back once I've done a gauge swatch and blocked it as well. But yes, very, very excited for this one. And I'm realizing it's actually pretty much identical color to the Gallant sweater that I'm wearing right now. Then the next brand that I found was Apmezga yarn, and they are a hand-dyed yarn brand based out of Lithuania. They didn't have a lot of information on their website, and I didn't get a chance to personally talk to the people working the stall. But the reason that I'm including them is overall, I would say of all the yarns that any one kind of table stall had, this was the one that had the most yarns that I would have purchased because they had a very big selection. If you've been here for a bit, you know hand-dyed yarn is not really my go-to. I don't necessarily love the tonal quality of it. I don't think it works per se for the types of garments that I make for me. But this was one of those hand-dyed brands where just every color looked so exquisite. They had a whole bunch of shades of brown that I was, just like so excited about. I was just standing there feeling them and trying to see, what could I make with these things? But I couldn't think of the perfect project right now. The yarn was fairly expensive, so I really just wanted to hold off for the moment, make a careful, considered decision, and then this is a brand that I will order from online in the future. Some of the favorite yarns that I found here that I thought were the most unique, but literally all of their yarns were very, very nice. So they have and I'm really sorry if I'm pronouncing these names wrong, forgive me. The Sagita fingering weight, which is 70% baby alpaca, 20% mulberry silk, 10% cashmere. And that was 100 grams, 400 meters for a price of 25 euros and 90 cents. So this blend of baby alpaca, silk, and cashmere was just so soft. This was such an incredible yarn, and I think it would make a perfect shawl, something that's really like sitting against your neck. But for me, I would love to try to find a sweater or a cardigan for this in the future, because I think it would just add so much softness if paired with the right merino. Then the next one is also fingering weight, and that is the Libre yarn, and this was 50% baby camel, 50% mulberry silk, and it was 100 grams, 400 meters again for a price of $29.90 a skein. Again, this yarn was so soft. I have never personally felt any camel yarn before. I don't even think I knew that existed. This is maybe the kind of yarn that would be better suited for a shawl. If somebody's worked with camel before and you have an idea about what kind of pattern this would work for, ideally I'd make a garment with this, but I'm just wondering, is it the kind of yarn that is better to hold by itself, maybe double, or is it something that should be paired with another yarn? Because yeah, baby camel and silk, it's just such an interesting yarn combination. So please, if you have ideas for patterns, if you've ever worked with camel before, I really want to hear about it. So leave a comment below. And then the third yarn that I want to highlight from them is the Eridanus lace weight yarn. And this is a grade A 100% mulberry silk. It's a generous 100 grams for 600 meters, and it was $26.90 a skein. I really wasn't sure what grade A silk was, so I looked it up. So grade A silk is described as the highest quality silk characterized by long, fine, and pure fibers with a natural lustrous sheen. Definitely this yarn was lustrous. It had a beautiful kind of shine to it, but it was very soft. It didn't feel at all like the Knitting for Olive pure silk. This felt much closer to something like the alpacas that they had. Ollie, you're being very bad. I didn't purchase this because, again, I wasn't sure exactly what to make with this. I think typically the things I've made with pure silk didn't feel quite right here. Like, I don't know if it would make a perfect cumulus blouse, for example. If you want to see this yarn in a bit more detail, Yevgenia from Nicotina Knits purchased it, and in her video about Barcelona Knits that I watched yesterday, she does go into it. She shows it up close and she talks about it a little bit more. So go check that video out if you want to see it a little bit closer. But that was really beautiful. And again, I'm just really curious what pattern to make with that. Is grade 8 100% silk good for a garment? I was originally going to buy 2 skeins, or maybe even just a skein, I guess, at 600 meters. So for example, my Favorite Things Knitwear has cami number 10, which I was thinking about knitting this year, except you need to hold 2 strands of the Knitting for All of Pure Silk. Would that kind of top work well for this yarn? But then it's lace weight, so maybe it would need to be held with an actual fingering. So yeah, it's just one of those yarns where I was kind of struggling to figure out what exactly I would do with it. And at that price tag of, what was it, $25.90, $26.90, I would really want to be sure that I had the right project. So please, for that brand specifically, I really want to know what patterns each of these yarns would work with, because I would really like to buy them. They have this really stunning dark cocoa brown kind of color that I would love to work with, but I need the project. The next brand that I found is Quechua Alpaca. So they are sold through, I couldn't quite tell what was happening here. I think they're sold through a brand called, I'm very much gonna butcher this, Umalf Una Malay à la fois. Sorry. So I think that overarching brand has partnered with a cooperative in Peru, which is Quechua Alpaca. So the brand Quechua Alpaca is a cooperative underneath this bigger brand, at least from what I can gather from the website. So yeah, what I wrote down from the website is they have a partnership with Quechua Alpaca, which is a fair trade cooperative in Peru. The alpacas are raised in semi-freedom on the high plateaus of the Andes, and the alpaca is the sole source of wealth for many Quechua communities in Peru. I talked to the woman running this for quite a while. You could really feel the passion from everybody in that stand about the brand and really trying to get it into more people's hands. I really stood there for a while on the second day trying to decide if I was going to buy this yarn, because I did want to get a lace weight alpaca. However, I don't know exactly what color I would pair it with and which brand. So I want to make a cardigan in the new year, and I was planning to pair a cardigan with alpaca. But I think first I need to decide what the main base color is going to be and then pick the alpaca. So similar to Xolla, they basically just sell one type of yarn, which is the alpaca. Ollie, stop it. This is Ollie's fish, and we're gonna put it away for a second so I can finish filming this. So they sell basically one type of alpaca, which is from this cooperative, and they have 3 different weights of it, which is lace, fingering, and DK. And they have plant dyed or semi-dark colors from what I could see from the website. They may have more than that, but that's what at least was online right now. I personally really gravitated towards the semi-dark color. They had this beautiful, like, blackish gray alpaca, which I wouldn't typically use, but it had this really nice tonal quality that I think if paired with a solid color would come out very beautifully. And all their yarns, regardless of weight, were 25 euros a skein, which was comparable to other similar yarns there and also from other alpacas that I've seen. And I think in general, this is just one of those brands that you can feel very good about supporting because they are doing so much for a local community. Once I have found the perfect fingering weight yarn to pair this with for a project, I will be coming back to see if there is a good match for the alpaca. Then the next yarn is Biches Bûches. So this is actually not a new to me brand. I haven't personally worked with it before, but I have felt it in yarn shops when I've been traveling. They are a brand with Scandinavian roots, but based out of Burgundy, France. And All of their yarns are incredibly beautiful. I think especially the lamb's wool that they have, the mohair, but they are on the pricier side, which is why I've personally not worked with them, because I couldn't just stop by a local shop here and feel them, and I couldn't really remember which yarns I liked. Therefore, I didn't really want to risk spending the price, getting something, being unhappy with it, especially from a color perspective. I really spent a lot of time there, feeling all the different yarns, exploring the color palette, and I think I'd feel a lot more comfortable now spending that price if the project was right. The yarn I specifically want to mention today is their La Grosse silk and mohair. So they have their petite silk mohair, which is very similar to any other mohair out there. But this one was interesting because it's a sport DK weight. It's 28% mulberry silk, 72% super kid mohair, and it's 50 grams for 148 meters. But it is 21 euros and 18 cents a ball. So that's definitely on the pricier side. However, if you break it down to buying a yarn, like a fingering and a mohair together, or a DK weight and a mohair, probably you're going to land around the same price, since most mohairs are around 10 to 15 euros a ball, plus then you have another yarn to buy with it. So the nice thing about this one is it really was the weight where you could hold it on its own. And it just had this really beautiful, fluffy, cozy quality to it. I don't know how to describe it, and I really wish that I had taken better pictures, but the lighting was so bad, and this stand just had so many people around it on both days that I went. It is just a heavier weight of their silk mohair, but it does really feel like it has a different property to it. It's thick enough to be held single, and it comes in 35 colors. I specifically kept getting drawn to the dark khaki color, which was like this grayish green. So definitely you could see the green in it, but it wasn't full khaki, which I think is why it's called dark khaki. So this is one that I think maybe next time, maybe even for a cognac sweater, next time I want to hold maybe 2 mohairs double, I would consider buying this instead and just holding it single and seeing what kind of sweater that makes. Very, very curious to try this one. It just was definitely on the pricier side for me right now, but I'll be coming back to this one. Then the next yarn is Nakyang Yarn, and this is a South Korean yarn brand that's been around for over 50 years, and their European distributor is based in Cologne, Germany. So I actually remembered hearing about this yarn from Evgenia at Nicotine and Knits again. So the second I saw the label, I was like, oh, I've seen that before, and I've saved it because I've seen it in 1 or 2 of her yarn roundup videos. The yarn that I was most drawn to at their stand was the I'm Wool 4, which is a worsted weight, 100% merino, 100 grams, 175 meters. And I really like this yarn because with it being merino, it was very soft to the touch. It didn't have any rustic quality at all. I also saw online after that they do have a fingering weight, the I'm Wool 2. I don't recall seeing that while I was at the stand, but I think that would actually work better for me because I was tempted to buy this one without realizing actually that it was worsted weight. I'm glad that I didn't because I don't tend to make a lot of worsted weight projects because in Amsterdam, worsted weight is just a little bit too heavy unless it's the right yarn. I would definitely wear that if I was still living in Canada, but to just have a sweater to wear around here, it didn't feel that practical. So I think buying the fingering weight of this would make a lot more sense. Really, really love the color palette on this. So it doesn't come in a ton of colors, but the ones that it does, it's very rich. So definitely, like if you're in that autumn color palette like I am, it has the perfect color palette for you. And I think that's what kept drawing me over to their stand again, was I just kept getting drawn into the colors, especially the different browns that they had. This might actually make a nice jacket too. So if you had one that didn't lean towards the more rustic side of a project, like the Miles shirt jacket, I think is definitely needs a more rustic quality yarn, but maybe there is kind of a jacket that this would make sense for. So actually maybe the zipper sweater, the heavier version of it, And I think this would also make a nice just like zip up jacket. The fingering weight version, so the iMold 2 is 50 grams, 200 meters, and only €7 a ball. And then the final yarn that I wanted to mention under this is Xolla Wool. So they have almost no information online about them. I really tried to find some yesterday, and all I could gather is they ship out of Turkey. Other than that, there wasn't a whole lot. But for the most part, they just had a whole bunch of, typical hand-dyed yarns. They were really beautiful, but I was walking past the stand, not really paying attention. And then I got to the end, they had a very long table. And I came across these gorgeous marled yarns. So they are just a bunch of different strands marled together into a skein. So this is a yarn called Marled U. And like I said, it's many different single strands twisted together to make this marled effect. A big reason that I ended up purchasing this is they were promoting a deal where you buy 4 skeins for the price of 3. So I got all 4 of these for €39. So it was a bit of an impulse purchase. It was the first day, it was my first purchase. I just couldn't resist. But then I was looking at their website and they advertise each of these as being $8.95. They're the same 100 grams, 420 meters. And if they're $8.95 on the website, that would make the total cost for 4 €35.80. Whereas I supposedly got one of these for free, but I paid $39 total, which makes each of these $9.75. So definitely, I wasn't super happy to find that yesterday because I actually ended up overpaying for these, not necessarily getting a deal. Maybe I'm wrong, but that seems to be the case. But this is 80% extra fine superwash merino, 20% nylon. Regardless of the pricing thing, I bought these because I think that they're beautiful. For the most part, the rest of their yarn is just your typical hand-dyed yarn, but this one felt really special. I do love yarns like the Zauberball from Schopel or Spin Cycle, which I can never justify spending the money on. So I thought this would make a nice shawl. I really don't have a pattern in mind. I was thinking originally to do like the inclination shawl or the night shift from Andrea Mowry. But then I was looking and they're all like DK or worsted weight or even Aran weight project. These are all fingering. So have you made any of those Andrea Mowry patterns that have the kind of shifting colors in a fingering weight? Would it work? I was reading her descriptions. It seems like maybe you could change the weight. I guess it's a shawl, so you could. Or do you have another pattern in mind? I just really want to make sure it's highlighting all 4 of these colors together. I could also pair it maybe with another 1 or 2 Zauberballs. I can get that easily at Stephen and Penelope. So yeah, I really need ideas for this. I'd like to cast it on soon. So that's all the yarns that I wanted to highlight today. Of course, there were a lot of really incredible brands. I could talk about all of them individually because there was many, many more that I wanted to mention, especially ones that were like alpaca and silk. However, I really wanted to keep this short and just to the favorite ones that I found. I think the biggest benefit of a yarn festival is the opportunity to find brand new yarns. There's stuff here that I never would have found otherwise on my own. And I think, yarn brands that now I will shop from and really try to pick instead of my more go-tos like Filcolana or Sadness Garn, things that I work with all the time. In 2026, I want to make a very, intentional decision to knit from brands that are new and that I am also supporting maybe smaller brands. This was a really good way for me to experience those and not make like a blind purchase online, just hoping for the best. Because as you see, a lot of these yarns are not cheap and it would be a very big risk if you have a limited budget to make a purchase for these yarns and then not be happy with it. So moving into the second part of the video, I just really wanted to quickly touch on Barcelona Knits as a whole. So like I said, this is my very first yarn festival ever. I really tried to soak up everything I could. I signed up for a workshop. I met up with other knitters. I went to the opening event. I would definitely do a yarn festival again. So quick lay of the land, Barcelona Knits is a festival obviously held in Barcelona, Spain. It's over 2 days, so the 15th and 16th, Saturday and Sunday, and it was held at the World Trade Center, which was in such a beautiful location. It was right on the water. On Friday, there was an opening event that the event organizers held, and that's also where they interviewed the designer for the pattern that they created for the event itself. And that was the Mediterranean Forest Shawl by Ioana Rahman. And beautiful shawl. Maybe this is one that I will actually make in the future. There was many very gorgeous versions of it. And the other thing about the event was they did this little fashion show at the end. So they asked anybody that had a hand knit on, whether it was a shawl or a garment or even just accessories, to come up and give a little thing on what it was, what you made it with. And so I think there was about 20 of us that went up on stage and kind of explained what we were wearing, and definitely a lot of Stephen West shawls. He's so popular, and even at the festival itself, like seeing everybody just surround Stephen West was very crazy, especially because I mean, almost every time I go into Stephen and Penelope, he's there. So I don't know, it's not as exciting for me personally, and I've also never knit from one of his patterns before. The festival started at 10 a.m. on Saturday, but they also have workshops that run over the course of 2 days in the morning, afternoon, and evening. I signed up for the 9 a.m. Intarsia in the Round knitting workshop with Mika from Salt and Stone Knits. She is actually a US knitter who is living in Amsterdam. So I've met her at Knit Nights before and we chat online. Super nice to take a workshop with her. I really, really respect her as a knitter and a designer. Maybe good to know if you're doing a workshop at Barcelona Knits, the entrance for the workshops is completely different from the entry for the event itself. That wasn't very clear from the ticket. So you just get a wristband for the workshop and then you go to this other entrance. So that's good to know, because if you stand in the normal line, you will definitely miss your workshop. So definitely just ask where that other entrance is and make sure that you go there. So I went to the 9 a.m. Intarsia class, and I have no experience knitting Intarsia flat, which was a prerequisite for the course. I did watch a lot of videos. I understand the basic concept of Intarsia, and I think knitting it flat, I would be fine at. You know, obviously a little bit annoyed with all the little baubles, but I think I can make do. Knitting Intarsia in the round is a whole other beast. Total respect to anybody that attempts Intarsia in the round and can finish a whole project. I got through my tiny little sample and was like, okay, I'm good. I will never do this again. And that has nothing to do with Mika from Salt and Stone Knits. She explained it so clearly, and I definitely started to pick it up as I went further and further. So like, as you get more rows, it gets a little bit easier, and I found my rhythm just doing 2 colors. And I think if I'd been able to just continue in 2 colors, I would have understood. But adding in that 3rd color, my brain just totally exploded and was like, okay, we're done. But doing a workshop was super cool because you get to just meet a bunch of other knitters in a smaller group setting, which makes the whole thing, you know, less overwhelming. But also it was just a good opportunity to pick up a new skill, one that I wouldn't probably have ever learned on my own. I'm glad that I did it. And definitely in the future, I would do more workshops at a festival, because I think that's maybe actually more my speed. It was 75 euros for the workshop, but it was 3 hours and I felt like I got a lot of value from it. Also, as part of the workshop, they gifted us a free skein of yarn, which this one ended up being the perfect color for me. It's from the Lalanalu brand, which is a yarn shop there that I stopped into on the Friday. And this is their Zenit yarn, and it is 100% Merino Spanish wool. So merino Spanish wool, I guess. So yeah, that was also a nice benefit of the workshop itself. When I got out of the workshop at 12, I immediately got into the line for the event, and it was massive. Definitely be prepared if you go to Barcelona Knits, or I imagine any yarn festival on the very first day, be prepared to stand in a long line. They did have a drag queen to kind of help entertain and take pictures. They had a band playing. It was definitely a very lively crowd, but I was standing in line alone, so I just kind of pulled out my knitting and knit for a bit. And I was in that line for probably close to an hour and a half, which also made me realize I didn't have any coffee or anything to eat, and I wish I had done that before getting into the line. But eventually I got to the front, and that's when Evgenia from Nicotina Knits and Ina from Mareva Knits ended up kind of getting to the event, so they came in with me. And when you get in, there's two halls. So there is the main hall where the main entrance is. That's also where you get your wristband if you haven't received it yet. And there's 45 stalls in there. It felt very small and cramped. And on that first day with so many people, it was just wall to wall packed. It was hot. It was very hard to kind of get in and see all the yarn. So I found myself just kind of wandering around trying to find like a quick break in the crowd so that I could pop in and actually talk to the people running their booth or, actually feel the yarn. So for me, I don't do super well in big crowds. I definitely found it really overwhelming. But then when you move to the second hall, which was in a different area, so again, you go to another building, that one was much more open. There was also 45 stands there, but just in general, more breathing rooms. So if I were to do it again, I would maybe go to the second hall first, explore there, get my bearings, and then when the crowds lessened, go to the other one. The only downside is if you're there for specific yarns, you really want something special, there's a chance that if you go later, it might be sold out. But for me, knowing that I wasn't going to be buying a lot, that wasn't really a concern. And in general, just I think, Lisa from Lisa Makes, I went for dinner with her on the Friday. She gave the advice that really, if you just go around 2 or 3 in the afternoon to the festival, you won't have a line to stand in and the crowds will have dispersed. And that was definitely true. By the time I left the event around 3:34, there was no more line. For the most part, everybody had left for the day. So in the future, I would maybe take that advice, not bother going first thing. The only reason I was really there was because of the workshop. And I would probably wait for things to lessen or maybe just go on the second day because then the second day of the event was way less busy. And then in general, the event had a food truck. There was a restaurant in the World Trade Center itself, and there was a coffee stand. So there was food in that to eat. They also had Yogi Tea as one of the partners or sponsors of the event. So they had a whole setup of tea, which was nice, and lots of chairs and that to sit in the courtyard. So there was lots of spots to just go and sit and knit if you needed a break. We didn't necessarily do that on the first day, but on the second day when Ina, Evgenia, and I met up, we did just go sit in the courtyard, knit for a bit, and then went in and did our final purchases. And it was super nice that there was so many people from around the world at this event. So definitely a lot of Spanish knitters, obviously, but I met tons of knitters from the US that had actually just come by themselves. I met Lara, a viewer of this channel. Her and I went for dinner on the Saturday. She's from Italy. Met a woman from Poland, Asha, and just in general, it was so nice to meet people that knew who I was and were coming up to me and saying, "Oh, I've watched your channel before. I really love it." I have never been recognized out in the wild, so that was an interesting experience. But I also just loved, standing and talking to people that I otherwise wouldn't have met. Knitters are always so friendly, which is one of the best parts. You end up meeting all these really wonderful people that you instantly have something in common with. In terms of just a quick wrap up, what I enjoyed the most, definitely meeting people, viewers, other knitters who are on YouTube. I had the best time. I never really felt bored. I was a bit worried going by myself that I was going to feel really lonely, but I always had somebody that I could see. And actually, Lisa from Lisa Makes, she came into town for dinner Friday, but she's been to Barcelona Knits a bunch because she lives in Spain. So she was like, "I'm not going to bother going this year, but hey, why don't you come out to Biches on the Sunday and come visit me?" So Sunday, I ended up just going to this small beach town and getting to explore there and have lunch. That was really incredible. We'd never met before. We've just talked online. And yeah, Evgenia, Ina, and I sat and knit in the courtyard. We spent a ton of time together. That was definitely a really incredible experience. And, next time I think I would try to plan a little bit better and see if there's more people that I know there or try to get a few other people to come. Going by myself, I was pleasantly surprised to find that I didn't really feel alone. And then the opportunity to touch so many different yarns, meet people who are actually behind the brands, and just really see what else is out there from my little, yarn bubble here in Amsterdam, the yarns that I can feel in person here. It's a lot of yarns that I've worked with. This was just really, really incredible to get to experience so many other things. And I think each yarn festival would be very unique and different in that regard. So each one would probably be worthwhile to go see. The workshop was definitely well worth the money. I would actually maybe do a second workshop next time. For the most part, everything was sold out, or not everything was in English. But I think the workshop was probably one of my favorite parts because it was just a small group setting. I learned a new skill. I really got to sit and knit. So in the future, I would love to do more of those. And then Barcelona itself. I have never been to Barcelona. There was so much to see and do. I feel like I barely scratched the surface. Definitely, I would go back to Barcelona. I would go back to Barcelona Knits. And I think knitting is just a really great way to maybe see the world and have, baked in friends, people that you can share your hobby with and not feel like you're traveling by yourself. It was just really nice to escape the Amsterdam rain and cold and that winter feeling that's settling in and get out into the sunshine. It was t-shirt weather, even though it was November. And it was really exactly what I needed right now. And I really loved it. So that was my experience with Barcelona Knits. If you've been, I would love to know what you thought and what other yarn festivals do you think are worth going to. Obviously there's Rhinebeck. I know that there's one in Edinburgh in April of next year that I think I'm going to consider going to. But what other yarn festivals have you been to that you just absolutely think are worth going to? And don't forget to let me know any patterns that you think would work for the yarns that I mentioned here today. And also if you've worked with those yarns before and what your thoughts are. So thanks so much for being here today. It was fun to just share my experience and the new yarns that I found. And I'll see you in the next episode.